Chapter 573, Teaching a Lesson in Reality. In a forest in Blue Mountain Island, where the Resistance base was located. Sitting in a wheelchair, Callet raised his bald head and looked towards the sunlight that was scattering at the cave's entrance. His eyes couldn't hide his joy. He acutely sensed that ever since God reappeared over the land and stated his 10 commandments, the previous bloodshed and chaos had changed. From time to time, he would provide them with guidance which was filled with wisdom. Furthermore, he would observe all creatures and proactively interfere with the situation at sea in a bid to help the Resistance and everyone in Rorstad, allowing them to pass through a difficult, thorny path while still being able to see some hope. Perhaps this is the true meaning behind his reappearance over the land. Callet recalled the revelation he had just received and guessed that the red-haired woman named Helene was like a fulcrum for Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy and the forces out at sea. She was the key to spoiling the balance between the countries, and only by making the world's situation more chaotic would the people of Rorstad receive the opportunity of being liberated. Callet drew in a breath and quickly set up a ritual to pray to see God, conjuring Helene's picture. After doing all of this, he instinctively turned his head to the side and wore a somewhat mixed expression. Living in that direction was the high priest of the Church of Sea God, a priest who is a high-ranking member of the Resistance. Although they don't dare go against the revelations and have made tremendous changes, in many ways, they're still immersed in the past. They're obstinate, conservative, backward, and savage. They refuse to embrace a more civilized church. If this goes on, they'll one day be abandoned by God. Callet couldn't hide the smile in his heart, while he felt a strong sense of anguish. After scanning through all the believers' prayers and picking a few to respond to, Klein returned to the real world. He planned on heading out to search for a chance to enact true acting. When his right hand gripped the door handle, a ridiculous but possible thought came to his mind. My true goal is not to find red-haired Helene, but to use this opportunity to get to Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy and figure out what happened to Tycoon Jimmy Necker, so as to get to know the location of the ancient chronicles of death. That is to say, I only need to lure Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy out with red-haired Helene. As for whether she's the real person or not, that doesn't matter. I can make myself red-haired Helene and let Danitz send me to Strongman Ozil, get the reward, and easily meet Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy. What an impressive sequence of actions. Klein suddenly shook his head as he found a reason to reject the idea. Although I'm a faceless, I can't accept wearing drag. Could it be that overcoming my inner resistance is also one of the principles for acting? Furthermore, I don't know red-haired Helene. Acting as her wouldn't work. I would just be like her on the surface, and I wouldn't be able to fool people who are familiar with her. That way, I won't be able to meet Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy. Yes, the person searching for red-haired Helene might not be Tracy, but an enemy of hers. I don't know Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy's background. Rashly doing such an act would result in immeasurable danger. It's best to be safe and abide by my wishes. I'll first search for red-haired Helene, and after determining the details, I can consider the subsequent actions. At that moment, Klein suddenly felt that something was amiss in the living room. Danitz's snoring had softened, and the time between each snore shortened. Vice Admiral Iceberg is here. Klein turned the handle and opened the door to the bedroom. While making this silent action, Danitz sat up with his eyes open. He tried hard to hide his smile as he said, "Captain came. She said that Admiral of Blood's crew was sighted at Longtail Island and is continuing south. His destination seems to be the Berserk Sea. The source of the news is trustworthy. Longtail Island, the island at the southern end of the Rorstad Sea? From the looks of it, Admiral of Blood previously planned on coming to Bayam, but the fight between Kalvatua and King John Cotman scared him away. He circled around the area and headed straight for the Berserk Sea. Yes, it's probably because his intelligence officer, Old Quinn, didn't send a telegram to inform him." Klein felt pangs of regret and could only lament how reality changed faster than his plans. He had planned to make his hunt of Admiral of Blood become the crowning battle of the crazy adventurer and bounty hunter, Jayaman Sparrow. Killing a single steel Maveti ultimately lacks that shock and awe effect. Klein didn't say a word as he calmly looked at Danitz. Danitz felt a little uneasy from the intense stare as he gave a hollow chuckle. Admiral of Blood has fled. Your cooperation with Captain has come to an end, right? I can now return to the Golden Dream, right? Further developments can be done via your messenger. Klein pondered for a moment and took out a piece of paper from his pocket. He scribbled the method to summon his messenger. Following that, he flicked his wrist, sending the piece of paper out like a metallic plate. Danitz was a hunter at Sequence 9, so he easily reached out and caught the piece of paper. He scanned it before a scarlet flame rose in his palms, burning the paper to ashes. Haha, even if I forget it, Captain will have a way of making me recall it. He paused and squeezed out a smile before asking again, I can now return to the Golden Dream, right? Klein nodded slightly and said, yes. I can. Danitz held back his urge to pump his fist in celebration, afraid that he would end up antagonizing the madman, Jayaman Sparrow. He smiled cautiously and said, I'll first pay off the room for this period of time and buy a ship ticket. As you know, Bayam hasn't been calm recently. Captain doesn't wish for the Golden Dream to dock at the harbor here. At least you know how to settle the room's payment. Klein didn't say a word as he maintained his austere attitude. He draped himself with a coat and took his hat before walking towards his luxurious suite. When his back disappeared into the corner of a staircase and vanished from Danitz's sight, Danitz shrank back into his room and clenched his fist, pumping them into the air. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm finally free. He didn't delay in wearing his cap and heading to the front desk of the Wind of Azure Inn to settle the bill. He informed them that this didn't mean that he was checking out. Danitz quickly hit the streets and ran straight for a place known as the Seaweed Bar. He found the air fresh and invigorating. After he took a few steps, he suddenly noticed bounty posters pasted along the walls around a bend. Blazing Danitz, 5,500 pounds. The posters were just 2 steps away from Danitz. That familiar face allowed for a clear comparison with his cap-wearing face. Danitz clenched his teeth and revealed a sorrowful smile. He hurriedly pressed down his cap, nearly concealing his normal line of sight. But even so, he still felt uneasy. He went to a recent department store and bought a gray scarf. He wrapped it around his neck and hid his nose and mouth in it. At this point in time, Danitz relaxed somewhat as he sped up his pace and rushed for his destination. The Seaweed Bar was a place where gangs gathered. It was common for infamous pirates to appear there. Although this place wasn't like the Swordfish Bar or Amorous Leaf Bar that allowed access to a lot of information and resources, it had its own unique niche. It had many resourceful secret channels. What Danitz wanted to do was buy a scalped ticket to Gallegos, as this wouldn't need him to provide any identification. He knew very well that be it in the past or present, his bounty poster would be plastered across all the ticket booths. He had bought the first-class tickets to the White Agate via the same method as well. After entering the bar, Danitz didn't take off his cap and scarf. He carefully surveyed the area and found Daniel, who sold scalped tickets. He didn't directly approach him, and instead retracted his gaze from the thin and somewhat swarthy man who was in his 30s. He began searching for someone unfamiliar. After a round of choices, Danitz squeezed through the crowd and arrived beside a lad who was drinking at the bar counter. He tapped him on the shoulder and suppressed his voice. Do me a favor. What? The lad turned his head warily and ended up seeing a suspicious man. The lower half of his face was covered in a gray scarf, and the cap on his head nearly hid his eyes. He revealed almost nothing about his face. Such a dress-up simply meant that he was suspicious. This was because the Rørsted Archipelago's lowest temperature during the winter was about 10 degrees C. Danitz pointed at Daniel. See that guy over there? Buy me a ticket for Gallegos tomorrow. He handed over 3 one-pound notes and chuckled. The rest is yours. Although a scalped ticket was much more expensive than a retail ticket, Gallegos wasn't too far, making £3 more than sufficient. Of course, this was also because the journey was relatively shorter, and there was no need for him to buy a first-class ticket. The reason why Danitz didn't buy it himself was because he was worried that Daniel would recognize him, bringing him unwanted trouble. Back when his bounty was only £3,000, pirates and adventurers at his level or lower had to consider how many people were needed to take him down. The bounty received wasn't something that could make them forget about their fear towards Vice Admiral Iceberg and the risk of losing their lives. Hence, very few people would take the initiative to attack him. As such, his safety was pretty much guaranteed in such black markets. But now, his bounty reward had already reached £5,500. Even if several people joined forces, the amount of money each of them could get was a sizable sum. Furthermore, there were many people out at sea who were desperados. Apart from that, there would be people who found their own bounties too low and wished to prove their strength. These people would definitely challenge a target like Danitz, who was infamous but was of little risk. It was precisely because of this that Danitz was afraid that Daniel would betray him. Therefore, he hired a random person to buy it on his behalf. The lad held the cash and gave Danitz another look before getting up from his seat. He then walked towards Daniel. He deliberately slowed down his footsteps when he walked past some drunkards as he whispered to them. When Danitz saw this scene, he suddenly became guarded. He thought of a problem. With him acting suspiciously, it was very obvious that there was a problem with him. He was a perfect target for being betrayed. Do you think my reputation as blazing was bought? Danitz planned on teaching the lad a lesson after he obtained the ticket. At this point, he discovered that a familiar figure had walked in. He was an infamous pirate, Blue Eyes Meath, with a bounty of £2,800. And this pirate clearly knew this group of people were planning to betray him. Blue Eyes Meath still has a few rather powerful subordinates. Danitz didn't hesitate to get up and head for the bar's back door. His speed increased as he agilely forced himself through the drunkards and escaped from the bar. Then, with his rich anti-tracking skills, he completely escaped from the group of people. Danitz didn't dare to stay on the streets since it was already dark. The patrolling police and soldiers would begin increasing. He went straight back to the Wind of Azure Inn and opened the door to the luxurious suite. Inside, he saw Jayaman Sparrow admiring the dusk. Danitz had a thought as he forced a smile. "There's something, I forgot to mention it just now. Captain wishes to ask if you have any interest in meeting her at Gallegos." This was a question he had previously kept secret. He had planned on returning and telling his captain that Jayaman Sparrow wasn't interested. But now, he realized that he had a low chance of surviving in Bayam once he was separated from the crazy adventurer.